Hello and welcome back. This is Dawn. So today we are going to be creating a raven's nest, complete with the raven sitting in it. Now this was inspired by my last video where I promised you guys that I had this idea and I was going to try to get the video up for you guys before Halloween. I didn't quite make it, but here we are. I just missed that deadline. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. All right, so these are the two main products that we're going to be using in today's project. The new Lovely Layers Crow from Honeybee, and then the previously released Lovely Layers Roses, also from Honeybee. So these are going to be the main stars of the show. So I started by die cutting all of my pieces. As usual, I cut most everything from white cardstock. We're going to be doing a lot of ink blending, surprise, surprise. Went ahead and laid out the pieces for my crow and then all the pieces for my roses and ran those through my die cut machine. And then I did do 2 roses, so I ran those through again just so I could have 2 sets of those roses. And then for the leaves, I took a little shortcut here, and I'm going to cut those from Spellbinder's Dune cardstock. I also cut a set of them from some green cardstock I had in my scrap bin, as well as a couple from white. That way I would have choices of exactly where I wanted to go with this. Again, this is inspired by the White Witch card that I did in my last video. If you didn't see that one, I'll have it linked below and at the end of the video. But again, I wasn't 100% locked in. I just had the idea brewing and it was time to go ahead and work it out. So I'm going to start by doing some ink blending with Black Soot Distress ink. This is the crow or the raven. Are they the same thing, crows and ravens, or are they 2 different birds? I have no idea. I am not an ornithologist, so I'm not sure if there's an actual difference. But we are going to go with black nonetheless. These are from white, so we're going to have to color every layer. Once we stack these up, we don't want those white edges to show. So I'm going to take this black soot and I'm going to color pretty much almost the entire die cut for each one in this black soot. When it comes to the areas that will be seen, so when you stack these up, each layer will have a portion that will show from beneath the layer on top. So when I get to those areas, I'll pay more attention and I will ink blend those more intentionally. But for the most part, especially in this back layer, I'm just covering most of it in this black soot. And if you wanted to, you could add some depth to this black. So if you wanted to, say, put down a dark purple and then come over that with black, or a dark blue and then come over that with black, so that your raven had kind of a sheen or an undertone of blue or purple, that would look really pretty as well. For simplicity's sakes, I'm just going in here with the black soot. Now, you might be wondering, hey, Dawn, you titled this No Tips, No Tricks, just basic blending and assembling. So in case you're new here, you may not know, I have a dark sense of humor. I'm extremely sarcastic and I'm here for the roast and the self-deprecation. So in my last video, the title actually came from a comment that was left, said, I didn't see anything in here that could be classed as tips and tricks, just basic blending and assembling. And I literally laughed out loud. I was like, fair, hey, thank you for the title of my next video. So that is where that came from. That's just me being a smart aleck. Y'all, that's how I roll. That's how I am. If you are a member of our private group over on Facebook, you know I am constantly roasting myself. So, y'all, it's just art. It's not that serious, and everybody has an opinion. So I'm I'm here for it. But yeah, I mean, this is some basic blending, you guys. Each layer, I'm just blending that black soot in here. I'm going to give him the appearance of a rounded tummy and some highlights where the light would be hitting him, so his head and his chest. So heavier on the edges and lighter where I want it to be lighter. Here in the tail feathers, I'm going to lay that brush on its side and I'm coming in and I'm deepening up between the feathers. You can see there's some debossing on these dies. So I'm just following what's there and just creating a little bit of depth and kind of giving a little bit of 3D effect to my shading so that those debossed areas really stand out. So you can see there on his talon there, it does look like they're actually 3-dimensional as well, because I've added in some shade and some highlights. Here, I'm also doing the same thing with his beak, laying that brush on the side so that I can get some finer demarcations of color there in between his upper, what is this? It wouldn't be a jaw, between the top beak and the lower beak, but it's all one beak. You know what I'm trying to say. So that's what I'm doing here. And finally, I'm just going to start working on his wing. So the wing is the last piece of this crow. I just love how simple this die is to put together and how beautifully it's done. Again, all of those debossed areas in the lovely layers from Honeybee, they do add a lot to these simple die cuts. And even if you cut this from like all shades of dark grays and blacks, those debossed areas really add a ton of dimension to the die cut, so that you don't have to go as basic blending as I do. You don't have to do the kite. I'm going to stop now. You do not have to put as much effort into your blending as I sometimes do in order to get great results. How's that? All right, so once our raven here is done, it's time to move on. What did I move on to next? I believe it was the roses. All right, so you can see here I created another crow off camera, and I think I accidentally used the wrong crow in the finished project, but you know, hey, it is what it is. So I put together my rose in the order that the layers should go, and I'm going to start with the bottom layer, the bottom 2 layers. So I like to take the bottom 2 layers, line them up, and this way I can see what's actually going to be visible from that bottom layer. So when you lay the 2 layers on top of each other, the top layer is going to cover most of the bottom layer. And so there's only going to be a small portion that you're going to see. So I like to lay it over, see what I need to pay attention to when I'm doing my blending, right? So here you can see that left petal at the bottom there, and just a little bit at the top is going to peek out from beneath the layer on top. So here, those are the layers that I really want to pay attention to with my ink blending. I want to be deliberate with my ink blending there. The rest I just shade to get a base color on. So here I'm taking that small detail blender brush from Honeybee Stamps. I believe this is the number 10, and I'm using pumice stone Distress Oxide, and I'm just adding a little bit of shading here to cover this back petal. And just like I did with the crow, I will add a little extra pumice stone all around the base of the die cut, so that when the layers are stacked one on top of each other, I don't have this white edge going all the way around the flower there. All right, so like I mentioned, these roses were inspired by the white roses that I did on the last project, and these were also inspired by the Gothic red roses that I did last Halloween. And again, I will have that linked in the description box and at the end of this video if you want to check that one out. That one, I was much more detailed with my ink blending. Here, we are in fact actually going to be a little more basic with our blending. So because these are white roses, there won't be quite as much detail visible, right? I don't need to, and I'm not going deep and dark and really Gothic with the flowers here. I want them to remain white, but I do want to add a little bit of brown to them so that it does look like they're aging just a bit. So I'm going to grab the frayed burlap Distress Oxide ink, and I'm using a Bitty blender. What is this? This is a Bitty Bunny blender. It's from Rabbit Hole Designs. I'll have it linked below. And I'm laying it on its side. I really like these brushes for getting into detailed spots. I do have smaller blending brushes, but these ones are still my OG favorite. They just are perfectly cut for laying on their side to get those real detailed lines. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that I'm used to them, and I've kind of honed my technique with them, so it could be that. But you can see I'm able to get some pretty precise detail with, even though they're a little bit larger, I'm able to just lay them on their side and use the edge. So again, start with that pumice stone, put down a base layer so that our rose is not stark white, it's more of a kind of creamy color, and then using that frayed burlap to just kind of add a little bit of aging to the edge of the petals. If I get too dark, I can always come over with a layer of that pumice stone, and it will kind of knock it back a little bit. Because it is an oxide ink, they're a blend of dye and pigment inks. So that pigment ink will sit on top, and I can use it to kind of cover up or lighten up any areas where I went too dark. Now, originally I thought I was going to go much more aged with these roses, take them past the point of their prime quite a bit. In the end, I didn't end up doing that. I ended up keeping these ones a little bit more bright. So our previous project was very light and airy, and then we had some shots of dark. Even though everything had a little aging to it, a little grunged up, for the most part, the background was lighter. The boots were light, the white roses, and then we only had a couple shots of dark. In this one, we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to have a lot of dark, deep colors, and then a couple pops of bright. So these roses are going to serve as one of our areas of brightness. So I opted to take this a little bit more clean. It's still going to have that grungy look. It's just not going to be like a full-on dried out rose. So there is that. If you wanted it to appear more aged, you could just go heavier with your browns and take it past its prime. Take it to where it's starting to dry out. All right, so now we're going to zoom in quite a bit here, and we're going to slow it back down to real time because now we're on the layers that are going to be much more visible. Our back layers, a lot of them got covered up, and really all we can see is the very tips and the edges of the rose. When we get to these next layers, we're going to be quite a bit more detailed, and a lot more of the finished design is going to show. So for that, like I said, we're zoomed in and we've taken it back to real time. Side note, do not judge me on my fingernails right now, you guys, okay? I was adamant that I was going to get this up for you guys yesterday on Halloween because I had promised you that I would try, and I did. This is actually Halloween morning that I'm working on this. However, my kids had plans last night, so they were not here, and that left me on door duty for the trick-or-treaters, so I didn't have a chance to voice this over until today, which means I also had no time to do my nails. So just give me a pass on that, okay? All right, looky here, you guys. I've got a tip. There's a tip in here. What you just saw me do was mark off what was going to be visible once we lay the other dye on top of this. So I took that pumice stone and I just made some marks there, and that's the only part that's going to be visible when we lay that die cut on top. So if you wanted, that's the only area you really have to pay attention to. Now, we've established this. I can't help myself. I'm going to do way more than is necessary. Half of it will be covered up by the next layer. It's just the way it is. It's how I work. It's part of my creative process. So if you have a creative process, even if it's unnecessary, it's not going to be visible in the finished design. If it helps you work out your design, like, you do you. Like, do whatever brings you joy. For me, it's doing more than is necessary. It's just the way it is, and I embrace it. It's how I roll. So just like the previous steps, once I'm done with that pumice stone, I'm going to come in with that Rabbit Hole Designs brush, add a little bit of frayed burlap. And you can see how this is starting to add a lot of shape to the petal. You can see how the petal isn't just stiff. It actually has a little bit of movement to it. Now this one also, the petals that lay on top, the layer that goes on top of this has a deep V cut in it. And so a lot of this bottom portion is going to be shown. So a lot of that is going to be darker. It's going to be in shadow. So I'm going to bring that pumice stone up higher so that we can get that bottom portion of this petal nice and dark. I'm going to dry fit these together, see how it's looking, how it's shaping up. And then I'm going to lay the next layer on top, and that's going to let me know if I've gone dark enough or not. So we'll lay that on top, and I can see I still probably need to go a bit deeper. See, we've got that little like cavern in there. I probably want to go just a little bit deeper right in there. And I will a little bit later, but for now we're going to move on to these, the top 3 pieces. So this one we're not going to see very much of. We will see the background of the inside of that front petal, and then we will see just the very tip there we go. So you've got 2 little areas there that are showing. You can see those. So we're going to deepen up the back of this petal. So that would be the inside of the petal where the petal is folded around. So we're going to deepen that up. And then I'm going to practice my shading here for that final top petal. So remember I told you sometimes I will use the layers underneath to practice what I'm going to do for the layer that'll go on top. And that's just so that I can get a feel for what I need to do. So any mistakes that I make, or if I decide I don't want to shade in a spot or I need to go deeper in a spot, I can work that all out here. So it's never wasted time in my book. It just is more practice, and practice makes progress. So, all right, now we're going to go ahead and build in the shadows for this petal that's going to be showing. So I'm using that bitty blender brush with the pumice stone, and then I'm just coming in with the frayed burlap that's left on this rabbit hole blender brush here, and just dirtying that up a little bit. Likewise, I will add just a little bit more depth to this petal that's turned, and then when I lay this on top, you can see how it's going to look like the inside of that petal. It's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so now we're moving on to the top piece. Now, because I worked out kind of what I want to do and it's sitting there, I can glance over at it and just mimic what I did on that petal underneath for this top layer. So like I said, it's always good to use those previous layers as practice pieces. So here I'm going to make this petal look like it is wrapping around the bowl of the rose. So as it wraps around toward the back, it will get darker. As it comes around the front, it'll be lighter. And I'm actually going to leave pretty much a full white highlight in the very center of this petal. I want that top petal to look like it's folding over just a little bit as well. So I'm adding a heavier shadow underneath the top and then here at the bottom where the petal would meet the base of the rose. And then I'm constantly stopping and putting the pieces in place just to make sure that I'm happy with where it's going. At this point, I can go ahead and make any adjustments that I need to make. So here we need to just deepen up and add a little bit of shadow to this little bottom petal here that's coming out from underneath. And then for this very top layer here, these are two petals where they're folded over and they're actually coming at you. So I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow to both the inside and the outside. And I'm also gonna separate these two petals by adding a little bit of shadow in between them. So now they're gonna look like two separate petals. And that is how you would do like a white rose with some basic shadow. If you wanted to, you could use a very light color. So if you wanted to use something like milled lavender or maybe tattered rose to add in your shading, if you wanted to kind of tint this a little bit into a color versus being a pure white or a cream rose, I think that would look gorgeous as well. So you can really modify this to fit whatever design you're working on. Now I do end up adding just a little bit more grunge to these because again, we're creating this raven's nest and I just thought it fit a little bit better with this kind of spooky vibe we've got going. So here you can see my finished roses. I created a couple off camera and I did add a little bit of ground espresso to the tips of some of these petals. Again, I just wanted to age them a little bit further because I am going for a little bit more creepy vibe. So next up, we're going to work on the leaves. Now this is cut from Dune cardstock, so it's already kind of a light brown. I'm going to take that frayed burlap and just add some basic shadows in here. Again, working from off of the object, working on the mat, bringing the brush into the die cut in circular motions. I'm just going to add some shadow to the edges of the leaf and down the center. You can see by the debossed lines in here are giving us directional lines, the shape of the leaf, and then those lines, the veins of the leaf, make it look as if the leaf is dipped in the middle, and then the edges of the leaf are coming up and then folding over. So I'm just following that. I'm following what's already built into the die cut. Now I've grabbed some ground espresso and I am deepening up those shadows because again, I want this to look creepy. So I'm going deeper with that brown and then I'm going to bring in some black soot on top of that because I want these leaves to look like they are dying. So if you wanted to stop here, you could. And I do love me a good ivory and tan color scheme. Absolutely beautiful. I think there's an elegance to it. And it's a beautiful wedding color scheme or even a Christmas color scheme, believe it or not. So here I'm going to take it up just a little bit, just bump it up a notch, and I'm going to follow the little notches here in the die cut using the edge of that detail blending brush. I believe this one is in number 7. And I'm taking that shadow deeper into those veins of the leaf. I'm also coming in here with the back of this brush and creating a little bit of shadow along the central vein of the leaf. So you can see here by just adding that little line of darker color on either side of the central vein there, it makes it look more three-dimensional, like the vein is popping up and the top of the central vein there is catching the light. So again, this is just one of those optional things, but if you want to add more detail to that die cut and really make it pop, this is one way to do it. And you can continue to add as much depth and detail to this as you want to. You can stop at any time and you can keep going. All right, so here are my main pieces. I've got my my roses, the leaves, I did some in the brown, and then I colored some of the white ones so that I could get some paler leaves. And we've got our crow. Now I want to create a crescent moon in the background here. And to do that, I'm just going to simply use two concentric circle dies here. So these are the Spellbinders Everlasting Circles, I believe. Now you could get away with just using one circle, and you could cut it and then shift it and cut it again. I like to use a slightly smaller circle because it does give you a slightly different crescent shape. So once I've cut that first larger circle, I'm going to take the slightly smaller die and I'm going to offset it, and then I'm going to tape it in place and run that through my die cut machine. And this is going to give me this crescent moon here that I can slip in behind my crow and my florals. Now I'm going to add a little bit of shading to this just so that it gives more of the appearance of glow. And I'm going to use the same colors that I used on the rose. And I did do that off camera. Now we're going to jump into the background and how we did the background, because this video is getting quite long. We're already at 20 minutes. So we're going to skip to the background. And for that, we're using the Tangled Web 3D embossing folder. So I'm going to start here with a piece of off-white cardstock. Now this is, it's actually a cardstock that I used to sell in my shop, which is now closed in case you're new here, but it's oatmeal. So it's got a natural fiber fleck to it. So it's got some imperfections in it. I absolutely love this. It's going to be perfect for the background that we're going for, but I don't want it to be bright. I want it to be darker. But I also don't want a smooth blend here. I want to create almost like this atmospheric lighting in the background. So I want it to be I want it moody. I want it uneven. I'm starting with that pumice stone. I'm blending in from the edges. This pumice stone isn't too much darker than the cream when we're talking shade or tone, but it is definitely a little dirtier. It's a warm gray, but it's cooler than this cream. So that's just going to kind of prime the paper, give us a good base. Now I'm coming in with that frayed burlap, and again, coming in from the edges. I know we have that crescent moon there, so I do want a bit of brightness in the center, but again, I'm going for that atmospheric lighting. So I'm just kind of haphazardly bringing this in from the edges, keeping it lighter in the center, and I'm not doing a smooth blend all the way around with each color. I'm doing the same thing here with the black. Again, not going in smooth. It's splotchy. That's fine. This is what's going to give me that moody look, right? So coming in with that black and a smaller brush, because it's going to cover less territory. It's going to cover less territory than a larger brush, and it's going to create smaller little brush strokes, and it's going to break up, and I'm going to be able to see those pops of that pumice stone, the cream, and the brown coming through the black. So you can already see this starting to kind of take shape. I love this technique. I love the way it looks. And if you're on the fence about it, don't worry, because once we run this through the 3D embossing folder, it's going to look a little bit smoother than it actually is. So here I'm trying to decide if I'm ready to run it through the embossing folder. I wasn't quite ready. I want to go a little bit darker, but I do want to add another layer of this after I emboss it as well, because those high points on the 3D embossing are going to catch more of the ink. So just a little bit more color here, and then I'll run this through my die cutting machine with the 3D embossing folder. And here you can see all of that beautiful detail that we get from that embossing folder. Absolutely. I told you guys in the last video, this is my favorite web folder on the market right now. All right, at this point, I wanted to test to see if I had it dark enough. So I'm going to just take everything, I'm going to lay it out on top of the background. This is going to give me a good idea of anything that I need to deepen up at this point. I can't go lighter, remember, but I can definitely go darker still. So I'm going to lay everything out, and spoiler alert, I do end up changing out that moon. That is the one thing that I can go lighter with. I die cut it from a very, very, very pale green cardstock, like a yellowish green, and it was blending into the background, and I wanted it on the same brightness level as the roses. So I do eventually switch that out to a bright white moon, and I left this in here so that you can see the difference. Maybe you will like this one better, and if you do, then by all means, go with a darker moon, but I do switch it out to a brighter white one. So at this point, I decided that I do want to go darker. So I'm going to grab that ground espresso and add that in. Not only do I want to go darker, I want to warm up this background a little bit. I was looking more on the gray side, and I definitely wanted to add some depth and dimension to the blacks. So earlier I mentioned how with the crow you could have put down a layer of a dark purple or a dark blue and then come in with that black soot on top to give that black more depth or an undertone of blue or purple. Here, I'm going to give my black an undertone of browns. So it's going to be a warmer black. So here I'm going over that ground espresso with the black soot, and you can see how it's starting to read as a black, but it's definitely a warmer black than it was before. And I'm going to allow some of that brown to peek through in areas so that I still end up with that, that atmospheric moody background. I'm also keeping these darker areas to the edges of the paper, so this will automatically make that center area appear brighter, which is going to make everything that I put on top of it pop more. And you can see here how now that moon automatically appears a little bit brighter. Those flowers are popping more. And now it's time to create some filler pieces to really build out this nest. I've die cut a couple of twigs here from the Lovely Layers Winter Greenery, and I'm just going to add a little bit of this black glint embossing powder to it. So I'm using a Tim Holtz Distress embossing pen to apply a little bit of embossing ink in areas, and then I'm just going to dip this into that embossing powder and then heat that with my my heat tool, and this will add some deep black and glitter to our twigs here. Now crows, they like shiny things, so if you wanted, you could cut this from glitter paper. You could add a lot of sparkle in that nest to really play off of that sparkly bit. I just wanted to add a little hint of it, so that's this black glint embossing powder from Wow is perfect for that. And you can see here when I shift it in the light, it's just the littlest bit of sparkle. So I repeated that on the remainder of the twigs, and now it's time to move on to adhering our background to our chipboard. I've pre-inked the edges just lightly with those same pumice stone frayed burlap, a little black soot just to dirty up those edges. And I'm using a paintbrush to apply some multi-matte medium to the chipboard, and then I will adhere my background. I'm going to pick up the chipboard and lay it face down on the back of my background. Now the reason I'm doing this is because this is an embossed background, and I want to make sure that it's centered so that the embossing goes from edge to edge of my background. This way I can see where the embossing is through the back side and make sure that it is centered. Use my finger to burnish this in, and then we can rip away the edges. To rip away the edges, I'm going to fold the paper back so that it creates a crease line for me, and I know where I need to rip. It'll also make it a little easier to rip. We don't have a lot of paper hanging over the edge here, so it is a little bit more difficult. But sometimes I'll pull it away from me and sometimes I will pull it towards me, and this will cause it to tear into the design, which is why I inked the edges of our chipboard before I adhered this. Now, if you don't like this look, you can always just flip it over and use scissors to cut away the excess paper from the back. That would give you a very clean line. But again, I wanted this kind of grungy look, so tearing the paper worked really well for me. I did this on all four sides. Next, I'm going to come in and re-ink those edges. I need to blend in the paper with the background here. So I'm just going to take a little bit, again, of the ground espresso, the black soot, and just blend in those edges so that I don't have those white tears. If you like the white tears, looking at it, it didn't look bad, actually. You could have left them. This is, again, everything's optional. Everything in here is optional. These are just things to get your creativity going. Maybe you'll pick up something in these videos that you'd like to incorporate into your work. Maybe there was a point in the process here that you said you would have stopped at, that you liked it best at, then by all means do that. So there's multiple points. When I'm watching back any of these videos, these process videos, there's multiple points at which I'm like, hey, I could have stopped there. That looked good. Again, it's all just about inspiration. Take what you want and leave what you don't. All right, for the next step, just like last time, we're going to take our sanding block here and we're just going to sand those edges a little bit. Yes, we just inked them, but don't worry, we're not going to take away all of the ink that we added. We just want to blend those edges into the chipboard a little bit again. And then we're actually going to take this into the middle of the paper. So I'm rubbing this gently across the surface of the project, and what it's doing is it's removing the ink from the high points of the embossing. So you can see those webs there really start to show up. It's almost like light is hitting the webs and turning some of it white with reflection. Really love the way this turned out. I'm going to go ahead and hit the edges of our board here with the black soot just so that they're not white. And with that, it is finally time to start adhering. All right, so I am going to throw this into fast motion. I'm going to let you see how everything is how I build everything up from start to finish. I'm not going to show the actual adhering because it's just how I always do it, just a mix of liquid adhesive and foam adhesive, but you're going to get to see me lay everything out. I'll go back and forth a couple times and try different things. I'm going to shift it up or down, but that's the method. You have to put the things in the space, see if they work, and then adjust as needed. You'll notice that there's a couple extra pieces in here. I did die cut some extra leaves there. Those were from the Lovely Layers. I think they are the autumn greenery, fall greenery. I'll have it linked below exactly which one it was. But I'm just going to kind of tuck things here and there. I've got some gauze that I'm laying behind the roses. Again, the more I built this out, the more the whole nest idea came to me. So that's where the twigs came in, the gauze. I'm going to stuff some threads in there. I just wanted to make it look like this was a raven's nest. Now this part of the process, the arranging and then the gluing, the adhering, this portion of footage was 40 minutes. So that's how long it took me. That's how long it took me to first make the arrangement and adhere it. A lot of you always ask me, how long did this take you? Some of the cards take hours, some of the cards take days, but it's like a couple hours here and there on each day. If I get stuck or if something just doesn't feel right, I walk away. I'll either walk away, like do dinner or take a walk, eat lunch, watch a show, whatever, or I will work on something else. Maybe I'll go on to illustrating or work on a different project. You don't have to finish it all in one sitting. So that is pretty much it. I've just got to adhere things in place. I do think I move a couple of things around and I even add a couple things. So let's go ahead and review the final project. And here you have it. So you can see here, I did move a couple things around. And it was because as I started building, I really started to get that nest idea. So I like the little bit more chaotic look of our nest here. Like this raven has just collected things and tucked them in. But if you like a cleaner look, then the previous arrangement might be more your style. I love this background. I'm definitely going to be using this technique again in the future on different things because I do really love the way that it turned out. And I hope that you love the way that this turned out. If you did, don't forget to give this a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of my future videos. I truly hope you enjoyed this. If you're looking for any of the supplies that I use, they'll be listed in the description box below. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.